with a whole lot of truth. Remedy Revolution is here for you. And now here's your host, Erin Page.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Remedy Revolution podcast. My name is Erin, and today's guest, I'm actually really excited to speak with. I've told our story many times. However, just to kind of recap, my son was diagnosed with a form of autoimmune encephalopathy called PANS or PANDAS. Nearly 14 years ago now. And one of the initial recommendations was always plasmapheresis or IVIG, both of which sounded rather invasive, especially at that time. And the thing that frustrated me about IVIG in particular was the fact that it was utilizing a pooled blood product that, came from a variety of donors. And so that was a little bit concerning to me, given the fact that he was already dealing with a multitude of infections. So today's guest has developed a treatment, a blood-related treatment that I think you'll be very interested to learn about called TruDose. His name is Tapley Holland, and I am happy to have him as our guest today. Welcome, Tapley.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, first off, I'd love for you to tell your story. So, how did you come to develop TruDose? What was the motivating factor for you?
Well, I've been in the stem cell industry for more than 20 years, and part of my job was I was part of the implementation of these various therapies, and I can tell you that within the world of stem cells that we know that these therapies can heal, but I also saw applications where they didn't heal people. So I saw my share of miracles, and I saw my share of like, okay, why didn't it work? It should have worked. And it just got me thinking, just because I was really well read in the literature that this must be a dosing problem. And it's the concept of dosing with stem cells is a really counterintuitive concept. It's very intuitive with regards to drugs, but we don't think about this when we talk about cells from our own body. So to make a long story short, around 2017, I had this, kind of this revelation. And um, even though I don't have any background in software, the software algorithms were essentially, given to me in my head, and I wrote them down, and I created this software. And I said, okay, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to take all the variables, all the factors that impact healing and non-healing within our body. We're going to stuff them inside of a platelet count, and we're going to measure our platelets, and we're going to determine what is the right amount of, in this case, platelets or dose of cells that we need to make sure that our bodies heal. And this fundamentally causes a dramatic shift from how we've done stem cell therapies for the past 4 decades, because how we do it, we essentially give the same thing to everybody, regardless of biology, regardless of the disease condition they're given. We basically treat everybody the same way. And what I said is, listen, we need to be determining a patient-specific treatment based on the symptoms of what they're displaying at that given time. Two people with Lyme disease have two different symptom presentations, even though the diagnosis is Lyme disease. One person has skin problems at that time. One person might have issues with viral EBV. You have to treat those two people differently according to what the body is telling you. So to make a long story short, I developed the software, and where my story kind of takes a right turn is that my son was injured by some shots at his 2-year pediatric follow-up. Typically the same story that we hear 1,000 times, where he was perfectly normal one day, and literally the next morning, he was not normal whatsoever. And my pursuit to heal him was diving into the literature as back as 100 years to say what can fix these metabolic dysfunctions, what can fix his gut, these viral loads. How do I solve these problems? It's got to be, how do I put his body in the position where his body can start self-healing? And everything kept leading me back to the platelet. So that I quickly pivoted right, and I said, hey, to my wife, I said, hey, what if we did this treatment intravenously? This is 2018. I said, I think if we do it at the right dose, I think this is how we're going to basically heal our son. So like any mom, she was the first patient, and her dad was doctor, and he was definitely not on board with the idea, considering the fact that, giving platelets back into our bloodstream and what we've known platelets to be inherently responsible for, which is clotting, that did not seem like a good idea, especially when I'm talking in the magnitude of giving back in the billions, tens of billions. But it turns out that this is actually the answer. And when I saw her results, and then which later became my patient number two, which was my daughter, I basically shut down my company for almost a year and a half, and I said I have to figure this out. And even though I wasn't a researcher, and I wasn't a medical doctor, and I think that was to my benefit, to be honest with you. I started recording the outcomes of patients coming to my father's office with all types of conditions: end-stage renal failure, metabolic dysfunction, encephalitis, um, chronic kidney disease, ALS. I mean, you name it, I saw it, and I just started recording the, and I started having the patients record their outcomes progressionally from their own words. And what that did is that it basically teased out how the body was healing in an order, and in an order that was essentially backwards, in a way that it actually obtained the particular disease condition. And so when I attributed that to dose, I said, okay, well, these are obviously patterns. So patterns started filtering out. And that's how I came up with a dose related platelets per mil that was essentially, this is what you need to start the healing process for, eye conditions, for Hashimoto's, for MS, for autism, for PANS and PANDAS, for Lyme, for whatever. And that data accumulation essentially led to what eventually became as my PhD thesis, which I just, got, about 3-4 months ago. And to summarize it all up, what we have not been taught as a medical community. We knew more back in the early 1900s about what platelets could potentially do. They just didn't have the technology. And essentially, the way we should perceive platelets is not as clotting agents, but they are the one factor when our entire communication in the bloodstream has become maladaptive, dysfunctional. We have all types of treatments that are designed and that are trying to create healing, but you can't do that when the communication between cell to cell is disrupted and has basically become in a state where it doesn't know who to talk to. Platelets have the ability during the cell danger response to unwind and basically translate the communication, disruptions. So that way the cells can get back online and get back into order. Yes, in terms of immune modulation, yeah, immune recognition, immune reset. So it's essentially like taking somebody with a dysfunctional disease. And the analogy I always give is like having too many apps open on your computer. Let's close the apps down. Let's reboot the computer. In this case, we're going to take the blood out. We're going to measure it. We're going to process it in a centrifuge and give it back to you, back into your bloodstream with the right dose. And when you do that, essentially everything is back online and reset at a previous time when you didn't have the injury.
So tell me a little bit about some of the nuts and bolts. So, what essentially is the product? Because it is, from my understanding, your own blood that has been processed in a certain manner and then given back to you. Is it something that is super invasive? Does it take a long time? I'm curious for people that are considering something like this.
It's not at all. I mean, if many of us are familiar with platelet-rich plasma, and we've had this done in our hair and injected into our knees, essentially that's what we're, platelet-rich plasma is probably the most studied therapeutic that exists within the medical literature. As far as safety profile, efficacy, application, you're essentially talking about taking a volume of blood from your arm. It's like doing a lab draw. And you take that blood and you process in a centrifuge. Everything is done on site. And you're separating the red blood cells from the plasma, so the red from the yellow. And then you take the yellow part and then you process that again, the centrifuge. And then you get the platelets. And that's how we make platelet-rich plasma. What we've done is said, hey, we should be determining how much you need to get back for the specific symptoms that you're displaying at that time versus just, separating red and yellow and giving it back to us. So in this case with TruDose, which everybody knows this as the treatment, the IV treatment, but really the treatment's not possible unless you have the technology. So somebody walks into the doctor's office, they have a few drops of their blood measured, either from a finger stick or maybe they have a line put in their arm, like you're getting a blood draw. You take a few drops of blood that's analyzed in the little analyzer we have. And then that platelet count goes into the software with all the metrics on the back end that I basically told you about that that impact healing and non-healing. And because a lot of those factors have to deal with, is my body in the ability to communicate right now in the bloodstream? I kind of figure those variables out. Does my body have the capacity to heal? Because we have all these treatments, but am I giving myself red light therapy when at a time when my body can't perceivably even handle red light therapy? And so you take all those factors and you put it into the software. Now, the software only tells the doctor or the provider one thing, and that's how much blood to draw. And you know how much to draw based on why you walked in the door. Is it brain fog? Is it joint pain? Is it neuropathy? Is it PANS PANDAS? Is it Lyme? Is it autism? Each one of those has a dose specific amount of platelets that's needed, that's going to stimulate your body to heal from that condition, but not an excessive dose to where it's going to cause an excessive healing response. So you have your blood measured, then you have your blood drawn, and then it's gone in the centrifuge. And by this time you're sitting in the office for about 35 minutes. Then the final therapy is tested again to make sure that did we get the right amount. And once we've confirmed we got the right amount, then it's given back to you. So you're there in the office for about maybe 40, 45 minutes. And then a lot of providers have the patients sit there for an extra 10 to 15 minutes for observation, but that's really where the really good stuff happens, like all the cool things that are happening in the body, the emotional shifts, people with neurologic pain getting instantly better. I mean, all kinds of things happen.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. So, are you seeing impacts within the first treatment, within, 5 treatments? How long would the typical course of treatment run?
Um, I can say this with confidence that it's very rare that somebody doesn't have something happen to them positively with any of the treatments. It just might not be what they're expecting. The body's going to heal itself in a way that, is not in your priority. So, for somebody who walks in with, say, neurological problems, they want the tremors and basically the shaking to go away. But what happens if the emotional state improves and you're laughing and doing hobbies that you haven't done in 30 years and you're off the Cymbalta and all the different, SSRIs? Those to me are much more impactful improvements, but you have to it requires a total frame of thought that we haven't been conditioned to consume medicine. So, um, so that's that. And the second thing is to your question was, how many treatments? Um, Essentially, you can look at it like this. If you have an acute neuro injury, like TBI, stroke, those are going to be less frequent amount of treatments. Obviously, if you have metabolic things like Hashimoto's or diabetes, those are going to be a little bit more. And then if you have metabolic neuro, which are going to be PANS, PANDAS, autism, Lyme disease, those are things are metabolically wrong with you, but are causing neurological symptoms. Those are going to take more treatments. And, how many is that? We're, anywhere from, 4 to some people are still doing these out to 13, 15 treatments, spaced out about every 6 to 8 weeks on average. And so we tell people, I wouldn't even consider this unless you're going to do at least 4. And the reason why is because there's a cellular reason why. I was just observing in the beginning that that's kind of like the time point when, when people ask, how many do I need? What that really means is how much do I need to do a spend, um, to make sure that I get the outcome result that I'm wanting. Because many of these patients have been down the rabbit hole and spent lots of money, and it's hard to kind of invest in this one thing that may or may not work, right? But by the fourth treatment, there is so much healing that's been done that the likelihood of you going backwards is not likely, unless something catastrophic, unpredictable happens. But your medical monthly spend and your entire state of health is radically changed by the fourth treatment. Radically. Um, and that's what enables patients to keep doing these because they can afford it now. They're not on the supplements anymore. They're off those different medications. Their whole medical everything has changed. Um, so, you know, if we're talking pans and pandas, we're talking multiple treatments because you're trying to unwind a lot of things. If you're talking, an acute injury like my son had in the summer where he got hit in the face with a baseball, and it took one.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you mentioned something I wanted to go back to. So, I'm a homeopath. I don't know if I shared that earlier, but so this whole idea of really the body allowing itself to heal, right? The body as a self-healing organism, rather than the idea that we need to take something to suppress a symptom or to lose a diagnosis. We might have to take some kind of pharmaceutical medication for life, in that paradigm. Whereas it sounds like to me what you're saying is that TruDose follows the same principle as homeopathy, meaning the body is a self-healing organism when we give it the tools that it needs to be able to function properly. Would that be accurate?
No, that is totally accurate. And to take it a step further, the title of my thesis, I'm kind of summarizing, is platelets as the endogenous cellular adaptogen, meaning the one thing inside of us that is responsible for taking things that are context dependent and kind of tweaking it to make it better. um, Adaptogens in the terms of botanical herbs and plants, they can help specific different pathways. And sometimes you have to combine multiple of them, right, to get an effect that you want, right? The thing is that, and I'm not, and I love botanicals, by the way. I mean, it's part of all the treatment, continuums. But many of these therapies, including botanicals, they require the cellular environment within the bloodstream to be stable for them to work appropriately. Cells have to be communicating and kind of like cross talking with one another to, basically carrying out the body's activities. The problem is when we're talking about the conditions that we're talking about, Lyme and Pandas and things that are dysfunctional, their cells are not communicating whatsoever. They're not. And that's an evolutionary response as a self-protection mode that the cells basically close down their cell walls and they stop communicating. And if you think about it, you don't want anything that's lurking in the body to get, wind or get on the communication highways like a parasite or a virus. So our cells do that purposely. But what is keeping functional happening when we are dysfunctional? What is keeping the communication between the cells to keep everything online? Because if nothing was to do that, how would the body operate? If the cells can't, basically pass messages to one another, how does the body function? Well, during those times, the platelet functions as that conduit. It has the key card access to every key porthole that our cells leave open. It has every key card access to every closed gate that our immune system tries to barricade other things that shouldn't be in there. It has all access, and it is translating and communicating messages between cells, between everything to keep the body online. The problem is that the body only makes the amount that it needs at that time. So what we're doing is giving more in there, to basically say, all right, I'm going to give you more of the help, but I'm only going to give you the more of the help that you need. So you put the right amount of platelets back in there, and it starts to bring things back online. And to add to your point about homeopathy, the way that you would see the body heal very much aligns with something called Herring's laws of cure. And if those of your listeners who don't know what that is, that's, I believe it was in the 18th century, a medical doctor named Constantine Herring sought out to disprove homeopathic remedies through a series of experiments, basically to discredit them. And through his experiments and through his observations of watching patients heal, the symptoms that they were displaying, the healing symptoms that they were displaying, were in a peculiar pattern of healing that not only changed his thinking, but, Herring's, laws became the backbone of naturopathic medicine. And the laws are essentially this. The first law is the body's going to heal in a fashion of top down, meaning you're going to heal from the top of the body down to the feet, greater to lesser, which means your greater organs that are more important are going to heal versus the lesser. And then the order of reverse order is going to be basically in an order reversing backwards in an order that acquire the disease that you have. So this very, 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 very much aligns with Herring's laws of cure.
So one of the things that so many people within kind of my sphere have talked about is this idea that chronic illness begets this kind of mitochondrial and metabolic dysfunction. So when we think of, obviously, what we were just speaking about kind of speaks to the fact that, we're assisting the body with the nutrients it needs, the fuel it needs to be able to, deliver appropriate cells to the appropriate places at the appropriate time. But how do we impact the body from a mitochondrial perspective? I'm talking about people that with long-term chronic illness who perhaps just can't get out of that cycle of chronic fatigue kind of symptoms.
This is a great question because I offer an alternate theory to principles that we already know. And it's within a paper that I'm writing. And I don't think anybody's going to really challenge this. It's that the cell danger response, which many people have probably heard on this, are familiar with, is an evolutionary response when our cells are the basic, building block of our bodies are the cells. When they sense any type of threat, parasite, emotional distress, broken bone, it doesn't matter. They go into a mode of survival. They don't have the time to distinguish, okay, was this a fight with, an intruder, or was this a broken bone? They just know to go into a mode of survival. And when they do that, they throw ATP into the bloodstream and they downregulate oxygen and they do a whole host of other things of as part of a primary defense mechanism. Now let's just think about that. This is the way that I think about it. Why would the cells, which need energy, why would they throw it in the bloodstream? Well, the easiest thing that I can think of is that, let's just take a virus, which is which our bodies have come in contact with, however long the body's been on the earth. If a virus were to invade the cell and the cell is full of energy, okay, that is the primary thing that the virus needs to basically survive. So what does the cell do as an evolutionary learned response? It's going to dump it and get rid of it because the body has survived for thousands of years, millions of years, as, hey, listen, you may get me, but we're going down together, right? So a zero-sum game. But unfortunately, these pathogens and everything have learned to basically test our immune defenses up until the point to where our body will not respond lethally. So that persists this kind of mitochondrial dysfunction where our body can't exit out of. So the cell starts the process and it tells the outside cellular environment, hey, here's a threat. I'm going into survival mode. And guess what? Every cell, every hormone, every transmitter, everything responds to that response appropriately and proportionally. Now, What we do as a medical profession, we try to say, okay, the cells are mitochondrial dysfunctional. We need to boost mitochondria. But again, to the cell's not is saying, I don't want you in here. So you have to fix that outside and turn down the extracellular environment, the outside environment, to tell the cell, okay, I'm sensing that the outside is cool. I'm going to open up my cell wall and start, conserving ATP again and start resuming the function. But what do? We don't do that. We try to fix the inside of the cell. What the platelets are essentially doing is fixing that outside environment. They're calming down the entire storm that's dysregulated and removing all of these viruses or bacteria. They're removing all of these damage, signals that our cells put out and calming down the entire extracellular environment. So when it's calmed down, the inside cell will say, okay, thank you. And then I will open up my cell wall and I will do what I'm designed to do, which is start conserving ATP and start, basically, functioning again. But we do it backwards.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying that, improving mitochondrial dysfunction when people who are healthy and who have stable extracellular environments, that's fine. But when you are dysfunctional and when you are maladaptive, you can't go to the cell because the cell is saying, hey, stop it. I'm doing this on purpose. Stop trying to give me more of what I don't need right now. Fix the outside and I'll fix me.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of speaks to this idea that, order of treatment is really important. And it's something that I've talked about a lot. But, if you've got a kid in massive neuroinflammation, you don't want to go after, things like mitochondrial dysfunction in that specific moment. We need to lower the inflammation first as a primary goal. We need to help their body, get out of that state of fight or flight before we start more restorative kinds of treatments. So in that scenario, where do you recommend utilizing TruDose on someone's healing journey?
I know that there's people might take this as me drinking my own Kool-Aid, but I'm not in the context of these complex conditions. I don't see how you don't start with this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because let me take something that's pretty on trend right now, which is say peptides, right? Peptides have a number of healing capacities from like anti-aging to even people with genetic disorders. Peptides are signaling fine tuners. Okay, it's almost like if the volume on the radio is turned off and I'm trying to adjust the bass of the delusia, delusia.
No, I'm here.
If you know, okay, peptides would be like the analogy of like fine tuning the bass and the treble. But
Okay.
if I can't listen to a channel and it's staticky because of the dysfunction, I've got to bring that static into somewhat of like something that I can hear and make sense of. Otherwise, the peptide, which is going to fine tune the bass, it's not even going to be relevant. Now, if the radio is turned on and I can hear the song clearly, which should be analogous to people who are not dysfunctional, who don't have these mitochondrial diseases, who are not chronically whatever, peptides work fantastic. What I'm arguing in this case is that signaling molecules like peptides, exosomes, which are other types of messages, other types of even stem cells, they require the cellular environment to be absolutely stable. The volume is clear, the message that I can hear the song, and then I can fine tune the bass and the treble or back seat and front seat. This is what the platelets do. They actually turn the static into something that my body can actually hear into words now, if this was a song. So in the context of these chronic conditions, I think I don't see how you don't start with this.
Mm-hmm.
If this is anti-aging, if this is, say, my son got hit in the face with a baseball, okay, different story, different type of patient. I still think that you can use this with those patients, but I'm just talking about, all the conditions we're talking about, just insert the blank, Hashimoto's, PCOS, endometriosis. diabetes, pans pandus, ALS. These are all where the body has become maladaptive.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about what makes TruDose unique versus some of these other platelet kinds of therapies.
Yeah. Well, the operative word is that we're giving the right amount.
Hmm.
So, and this is a good question because it's kind of like the obvious, but it's really when I say right amount, think of the easiest analogy would be like fertilizer. Okay. I know that I know the right amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium will make my yard green. But if I don't give enough, the right poundage per square acre or whatever,
Hmm.
my yard won't grow. So there is underdosing right there. So think of PRP treatments. Underdosing would be the analogy of like maybe some grass grew, but not very much. Um, and so and that is basically a function of your biology and then how much blood you're taking. Um, you know, how PRP is done today and has been done the past 30 to 40 years is that we basically take 10 people who walk in the door with the same disease condition. Let's just call it my right knee hurts. We'll take 30 mils of blood from each person. We'll separate red from yellow and we'll inject the yellow back into their knees. So the question I asked, does it make sense that we take this, different biologically different people, we draw the same amount of blood from them, will they all have the same outcomes? And then what is the dose to heal the knee? So so if you go get PRP anywhere else, you're basically getting a shot in the dark.
Hmm.
Now to go back to the grass analogy, let's just say that, all right, I don't want to take 30 mils of blood. Let me take 200 mils of blood. Well, now you just created the opposite end scenario where, yeah, the yard will start growing, but it's going to be growing at a rate that you're going to have to mow like literally every other day. Otherwise, you'll just have so much grass you can't even see straight. That's the equivalent of an excessive healing response.
Hmm.
So the analogy would be if I inject this into the knee, yes, I take 200 mils of blood for these 10 people, but now I inject this into the knee and I give them a hyperdose. Now the inflammation will go down, the pain goes away, but the structure of the knee, the tissues that are trying to heal, will basically be stuck in this state of hyperscarring because it can't exit out of that healing mode. And so the tissue itself will be structurally weak, just as it was as if you didn't give enough. So that person's going to come back in and get another injection a few months later because it still hurts. Whereas TruDose is giving you the right amount that you need that stimulates the response, but not the over healing response. And that is super important, not only with my knee hurts, but when you're talking about PANS and PANDAS and Lyme disease and, what you cannot create with these types of patients, the excessive healing response would be herxing just end on end, would be autonomic, overdrive where they can't exit out of these healing responses. And so healing becomes painful even though it's good.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's not good. So true dose is the right amount, but not the excessive amount for different symptoms or disease conditions.
And so, in the effort of true informed consent, what are the risks of TruDose, and are they minimized by comparison?
It, really, the risks are virtually almost zero to none. Um, and I say that because you're talking about your own blood; it's from
Hmm.
you, right? There's nothing that's being altered about it. But even if you know the literature in PRP has the most profound safety profile, but even us doing the intravenous with TruDose and pioneering that application, I can what's the word? I guess happily report that nothing has come back that's been adverse, and we're talking uh, over 20,000 patients.
Hmm.
So the main thing is that the main thing is again the right amount, identifying the right symptoms, and the thing is that what the good thing we've also learned is, what other healing modalities do you need to put around this, like
Hmm.
red light, hyperbaric, EBU, ozone? What other things do you need to put around this, and in what order do they exist, to get the body on a healing path that's linear instead of this up and down kind of like sine wave? So, and we try to do our best to identify providers that not only have the training and the expertise, but also the modalities to handle these chronic disease patients, versus we just don't give this to anybody.
Hmm. Okay, so for someone who's looking for TruDose, where would they find a provider?
The easiest place is our website, trudose.com, TRUDOSE.com, on the provider tab. And we've made that even more detailed as of late to help, patients identify, hey, this icon that has the picture of the baby face. That means that they do pediatrics, or the Lyme, they do Lyme. That way, as a patient looking for this, you don't want to go to somebody who, um, for, like, say, for example, PANS and PANDAS. You don't want to go to somebody who's not familiar with that. It's just a bad experience
Hmm.
all around. And so, so pay close attention to those icons so you can find someone close to you who can deal with what you are specifically dealing with.
Hmm. Okay, so when somebody is going through treatment with TruDose, what kinds of other modalities might they have on board simultaneously? And I know it's going to vary from condition to condition, but let's just say kind of this chronic picture. What other types of things can help increase the impact of TruDose?
Um, you know, and I'm glad that this is kind of getting out to a broader listener base. And to answer your question, let me show you something. Okay,
Sure.
I'm going to show you. Um, I'll flash it on the screen, and I'll let you read the title, because probably, um, everybody, probably can't see this, but I'll let you read the title. And I think that'll be self-explanatory.
All right, so for those of you listening, the title is TruDose IV Platelet Therapy as an Immunomodulatory Approach to in Pediatric PANS Pandas. And the lovely Dr. Nancy O'Hara is listed on here, as well as Tapley Holland.
So this is Dr. O'Hara's data, and we're
Hmm.
presenting this at ILADS.
Okay,
And I think we're waiting. It's either we've been accepted to ILADS and the Medical Academy of Pediatric Special Needs. We're waiting there the other, but I think that we should be accepted to both. We're presenting her data. This is, I think, in 40 plus cases. And again, Nancy does not have this system.
hmm,
So she refers it out to get treatment to people she trusts, and she follows the patients with her protocols that she does. And I'm coming back around to your original question.
sure.
And and the data essentially is showing a greater than 65% improvement with her patients, with, on the different PANDA scales, as well as blood and biomarkers. Now, your question about what other things help support this. The very simplest thing to answer that question is the KISS method, and keep it simple.
Hmm.
Um, in that the same things that Nancy uses to prepare her patients and follow her patients after TruDose are the same things that we kind of learned early on. For example, like ivermectin, high dose vitamin C. You want to kind of prepare the body right, before TruDose, and obviously doing things that are gut related, and then you're doing TruDose. And then post TruDose, the symptoms that TruDose is going to display to the provider should dictate what therapy that you should do. Is that red light? Is that hyperbaric? Is that EBU? Is that ozone? Is that sound therapy, emotional therapy? I mean, it could be a number of things, right? The reason I'm saying that is because we get caught up, especially with the conditions we're in, and rightfully so, that we're so anxious to get healed that we could be sometimes doing modalities that are actually what our bodies are not ready for yet. For
Hmm.
example, if I was to take my mom who's like in her 70s to the gym and say, all right, let's start working out and getting in shape, and I put two plates on the squat rack and had her do it, she may be able to do a few sets, but she won't be able to walk for 3 weeks. We often That is the same analogy with regards to doing the wrong types of modality treatments when our body doesn't need them at that time. You have to build the capacity and the adaptability for your body to actually handle that. So, to answer your question, if you're really, really, really sick, I'm just going to, all of the therapies work great from hyperbaric to red light. None of them are not good. I can't think of one that I would not say I wouldn't do. But I would say that, I would choose them in different times of my healing journey. For example, if I'm really, really sick, avoid therapies that will stimulate me, zap me, shock me, shake me, because your body can't handle that.
Hmm.
If you're really, really sick, avoid therapies that are really, really aggressive as far as cleaning out, like EBU and plasmapheresis. They're great. But if you're really sick, it's too much for your body to handle. If you're sick, just keep it simple. Let your body start building the resilience to heal. High dose vitamin C, ivermectin, TruDose, and maybe some other things. And as you start getting better and better and better, then you start implementing those other stronger therapies. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. I guess I'm curious. So, would something like a binder be something that you might want to take with TruDose, for example? Because, binders will then collect whatever the body is trying to push out and help you to eliminate them. So, is that something
Oh,
that some providers are considering?
oh, totally. Like if you had to kind of say what are the ABCs that you're probably going to get no matter what you walk in, you're probably going to get some sort of natural inflammatory or anti-inflammatory to kind of calm a lot of problems down on
Hmm.
the heels of, I'll call it, vitamin C or some sort of nutritional thing to help build up your cellular support, then TruDose, and then you have binder and probably glutathione to start stimulating detoxing. I would say out of that would be 90 to 95% of anybody who walks in the door, no matter what condition you have.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and then the week following TruDose would dictate based on your symptoms as to what to do. For example, if you a week post TruDose, you're still, kind of very fatigued and you're very kind of like I don't know, having possible Herx like symptoms, you don't you may not want to go in for the ozone that you had scheduled because you had it scheduled, and that you would want to cancel that appointment because you're still displaying fatigue like symptoms and you need to go probably heavy on the binders and the glutathione to help get that stuff out. So TruDose will help reveal the symptoms to help you understand, what therapies do I need to implement now?
Yeah, I mean, I always say that people get so fearful of symptoms. And one thing I always say is that, a symptom is just a message, right? It's the idea that your body is telling you where you need to pay attention, right? It's okay to have symptoms and not dive into some kind of, frantic Google search about like, what are all my symptoms? What kind of disease do I have that I can self-diagnose with? As a symptom is a message. So I think that's super important to use those symptoms to help guide the treatment. It's true individualistic treatment versus this idea of like, okay, well, you have this diagnosis, so we're going to give you, these 5 pills, which is a totally different medical paradigm, in my opinion.
It,
Um,
it And that's the way TruDose works. When you walk in the door, the first thing they hand you is the symptom questionnaire.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. I went to a place, and I won't name where we went, but I was kind of doing some retraining there, and the office manager's husband had had three TruDoses, and he had end-stage renal failure, and he had severe neuropathy. Now, they had given him three treatments, and he had zero response from it, zero. And he was a very much a skeptic at this
Hmm.
point, even with me standing right there in front of him. And I said, well, and he said, well, they've given me the neuropathy treatment because, my neuropathy is killing me. I said, okay, I need you to fill this symptom questionnaire out. It's basically divided into domains, brain, sinus, etc., skin. And he wrote it out and he ranked it based on, and what it revealed is that he was having these sinus issues at that moment, not neuropathy, right? And I turned to everybody and I said, I want you to watch this because I know your chief complaint or your condition is neuropathy, but you ranked the sinus is an issue right now. He said, yes, because the past 2 weeks I've been having this clogging and I can't hear this year, da, 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 and I can't breathe. And I said, well, that's exactly the treatment we're going to give you. Okay. He sat down again, extremely skeptic. Anyway, as it's literally being infused into him, within 30 seconds, he feels this intense heat all over his chest that goes through his throat to his face. And he's like, okay, this is a response I did not have the other three treatments. Whoa, oh my gosh. Okay, this is weird. And he touches his ear and he says, hey, could say something in my ear. And he goes, I can hear. And I said, I want everybody to see that because what we treated right then were the symptoms his body was displaying at this time.
Hmm.
I know he's got the renal failure. I know he's got the neuropathy, but the body's saying, hey, I'm telling you what the problem is with me right now. Fix this. If you want me to unwind it. And so that's kind of how TruDose works. You treat the symptoms on the first treatment that could be skin. You come back for the second treatment, you might be dealing with sinus problems. You're going to get two different doses on two different treatments.
Okay. I'm curious about something. So many of us in this world have these chronic infections, multiple infections stacked upon each other, and
I know where you're going.
um,
I know
so um, personally, I've had COVID now 10 times. I don't know. I've lost count at this point. But it's infection after infection after infection. I get myself to a real stable place. I'm real healthy. I do all the things, eat the right foods, and still tend to get these infections, repeated infections. So then I get my blood work done and consistently high levels of EBV, and a number of other mycoplasma co-infections. And so is there data to support a decrease in some of these infections within some of the patients that you've observed?
all day long. Yes, totally. Um, we've got, one of our earlier series was blood data with people with EBV, herpes simplex, cytomegalovirus, candida, Lyme. It was all part of these different pathogen panels. Um, and the results were quite remarkable as far as, I want to say it was like 70%, removal of, or at least it wasn't present on the next blood panel of the herpes and or maybe that was the EBV, and I think it was 100% on the herpes. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have risk of re-exposure and everything, but that's what those panels revealed. Um, th- and I can tell you that though we've seen blood data like that for all types of things, it doesn't matter what the viral thing is. So yes, there is data to support that. And when you're talking about COVID, I would say that's the one condition that we're actually doing a COVID spike protein study right now. And, one of the reasons that kind of inspired us is all the different people's spike protein levels are not just low, but like the lowest the provider's ever seen.
Mm.
Like I do these panels and these are the lowest I've never seen anybody with this low. It's like, okay, there must be something happening with clearance or something with getting the spike protein out and kind of resolving. And again, it really comes back to communication, how the cells are communicating with one another, immune cells to other cells, to the hormones, to everything. It really comes back to if we can reorganize that communication, and that's what immune modulation is.
Hmm.
And I just made it simple to say it's communication. If we can reorganize how those cells talk to one another, then everything will start to fall back in line. And that's essentially what this does. In the terms of EBV, as those viruses, those opportunistic viruses evolve, they learn to build defenses and avoid our immune system, right? To where the point to where our immune system can't tell if it's friend or foe. Platelets have this. Platelets are the ones that have the specific surface recognition for every virus, for every bacteria, for every fungus that we could ever come in contact with. And when they do, they're the ones who respond appropriately. So, for example, if it's an AIDS virus, the platelet will actually eat it and then basically hold on to it until the white blood cell comes down the way. If it's a herpes virus, it'll actually call in a bunch of platelets and surround it. And basically, think of like a gang fight. You're trying to, fight one guy. You're just trying to hold the guy there until the rest of the cavalry come, until the white blood cells come. So it depends on what the virus is, depends on how the platelet will actually, defensively respond against it. And the same thing for bacteria and the same thing for fungus as well.
Hmm. Gosh, well, still have plenty more questions, but we've reached the end of our show here today. I have 8 rapid fire questions I ask
Yeah.
of every single guest,
Okay.
and they are just designed to give us a little bit more insight into who you are and what makes you tick. So, are you
Oh, is
ready?
this okay? So there's no right or wrong answer?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. All right. Number one, if you could choose only one natural remedy for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Wow. I'm a little biased on this one, but I'm going to say TruDose.
All right. Number two, tell us something most people don't know about you.
I used to play professional baseball.
Nice. All right. Number three, if I were to compile a playlist of happy music, what song would you suggest be added?
Mm, I think it's, I think it's, I'm on this kick lately of the uplifting instrumental. I think it's Judah Earl, a lot of piano, cellos type stuff. I think that's what I'm on to right now.
Very cool. All right. Number four, what is your favorite guilty pleasure?
Mm, Strawberries Nutella.
All right. Number five, what is the most influential book you've ever read?
Ooh, mm, wow, that's a tough one. I want to say Gifted Hands by, the Ben Carson story.
Oh, nice. I love him. All right. Number six, what does the word revolution mean to you?
Ooh, I like that word. It means it means enough. Let's band together and let's go.
And what does the word remedy mean to you?
Mm, self-healing. That's the first word that came to my mind.
And then lastly, if you could impart one piece of wisdom onto our listeners, what would that be?
Mm. I have the benefit to see a lot of people do it a lot of different ways. And I've also been there. And I can say that healing is not so much, if the true goal is you want to heal, it's not so much as how much I can do, it's how much discipline you can and how much patience you can have uh, to withstand the grind that it's going to take to heal yourself. And if you can withstand that, if you can actually be patient and you can believe through your heart and through your mind and in your soul that you will be self-healed, you will get healed.
Absolutely. I love that. All right. For those of you listening, to find more information about Tapley Holland and TruDose, you can visit his website, trudose.com. Anywhere else they can find you, Tapley?
Just you know what, I would encourage everybody to just Google the word TruDose and become like everything self-informed and uh, be skeptical until you're not. And I think that's the only place. I'll be publishing a lot of stuff here that I've been holding back on here in the next few months. So I hope everybody will have a lot of stuff to read here soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see you all next time. Take care.
Thanks, Aaron.
Bye bye.
With hope as a guiding light, through darkest days we'll fight the night. With a whole lot of passion, with a whole lot of truth, Remedy Revolution is here for you.